Did you get Joy's message? She says, can I please get on the webinar?
Everybody's here. There we go. And hi, Mr. Cuff. How are you, sir? It is 6:31, and so I will turn it over to our chair, Ms. Hopkins.
I was really waiting for Miss Wadia, but I guess we can.
We can wait a couple minutes if you want.
No, I like to, everybody knows I like to begin on time. So let's go ahead, since we're here and she can come in when she's ready. So good evening, everybody. So I'm glad to see that everybody's safe and well, and we went through the storm and now we got a nice rainbow and our nice weather. I looked up in the sky, there was no clouds in the sky. So, you know, it was a nice blue sky out there. So thank you all for taking the time out to attend our William Penn School District's Policy Committee meeting. We'll be going to be focusing on the updated policy from PSBA number 247 regarding hazing. So now I'll turn this meeting over to Ms. Danielle Seward, who will present for you this evening. Ms. Seward.
All righty. Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to share my screen now.
Okay.
And I am going to hit present. So there we go. So good evening again, everyone. I'm glad everybody is safe. So this, as Ms. Hopkins said, will be discussing, and here's our agenda just for everybody to see. We will be discussing our, oh, I'm sorry. Apparently I linked the wrong, I'm sorry, the wrong agenda in the presentation. That is my fault. And of course, now I can't get out of it. But the agenda is very easy. It is policy 247. I apologize in advance. I am home and there's dogs in the background, so please bear with me. So policy 247, it does speak specifically to hazing, but one thing that I noticed about this policy was that it hadn't been updated since 2000. So, and we're in 2021, as you well know. So I felt like the new language that was sent to us in August of 2021 from PSBA had a significant amount of updates to the language to reflect new laws and new regulations, and just updates, you know, generally to how we govern ourselves around hazing. So the biggest changes where it includes statements directing staff to report the student to the threat assessment team in cases where behavior of a student indicates a threat to safety of themselves or others in the community. There was also added language for clarification around expectations, updated guidance based on laws and regulations that I stated before. And this is a mandated policy for the school district. And then they also offered a updated procedure for reporting hazing incidents, but it's kind of a universal document where it is a procedure or a document, a form to report discrimination, sexual harassment, bullying, hazing, dating violence, and retaliation as well. So it's kind of a universal report, which is a really good tool. So with that, I'll go to the policy itself. Okay. Can everybody see that okay? Because I can increase the screen. Everybody okay? Good? Okay, good. All righty. So so you'll notice throughout this document, the language that was in our old policy is the one that struck through. So like I said, because this policy is 21 years old, basically, all of the old language is struck through, and you'll notice throughout the document that the new language is a lot more extensive and gives a lot more clarity around definitions and expectations of all involved. So I'm not going to read word for word every part, but I will highlight a couple of things. So in this first piece, you'll notice that definitions of what hazing is, and then different classifications of hazing are laid out in this section. And it's really, really thorough because it also talks about aggravated hazing and organizational hazing and student activity and organization means. And so it gives a lot of definitions and clarity around language in this section. And so before I pass, for each section, I'll just stop and ask if anybody has any questions or clarity. And I also invite our chair, Ms. Hopkins, to share any thoughts, as she and I did review this in depth. I believe it was yesterday, so she can offer any thoughts she may have about each section.
Daniela, I don't really have a thought about this section, but the only concern I have is in the beginning of the document, not on this page, on the previous page, is references a threat assessment team.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is, similar to a lot of other unfunded mandates that we get. And so who is the threat assessment team? And I guess I'm at a place where I'm questioning how much staff in schools can actually do.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're talking about the same people now doing something additional. And so I'm trying to understand who is the threat assessment team and whether or not there was a definition provided for that group of individuals.
I can say in the language, no, there was not a definition given on that group of individuals. But what I will do is I'll note the question and we can research that and provide response to that.
And I guess the other question that goes along with that is there any funding to ensure that school districts or schools are able to put a threat assessment team in place?
Good question.
Because earlier on, we said it's a mandate. So, I mean, we don't have the option to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Would this sort of threat assessment team, would it overlap with a safe to say team that we have, right? Because that's sort of safe to say is also about threats. And although on the mental health side,
Mm-hmm.
would those teams also an unfunded mandate? I hear you very well, Dr. Becoats. But would those teams be able to overlap and sort, because this threat assessment team is about bodily harm or emotional harm, and safe to say is sort of,
Because
mental-
my understanding, as I reread this policy, the people that you're reporting to, the student, if they're reporting hazing, they're reporting it to either, it depends on their scenarios. So it could be their coach, their band leaders, it could be, whatever
principal.
organization they're in. So they're going to be reporting to a teacher. So it's already those staff that are already within the student organization. This is regarding hazing in a student-led program. So it would be, and then the teachers is then reporting it to their building leader or an SSO or whoever the student may feel comfortable with, and maybe directing it to them. So it's not more of if what's the word I'm looking for? If a person, Joy Hopkins, comes up in the school and wants to shoot up the school, it's not that kind of threat assessment team. It's really gearing towards the kids and the safety of which is what Ms. Seward and I were talking about, the kid on kid violence and the kid on kid bodily harm or threat of harm. So I think that threat assessment team should be more of what is already established. And I forgot the term Ms. Hoff used, but that's what we're looking at.
Right. I was just thinking about the safe to say.
Safe to say, thank you. I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
Okay, but we can get clarity around who is the threat assessment team. I think that's a good question. So if there are any other questions around the definitions, I'll move on. So for authority, the language here is pretty clear. It just makes a general statement about where the board stands as it pertains to hazing. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Does anybody have any issues or questions about this section? Okay, hearing none. It also adds in language about Title IX, sexual harassment and other discrimination, which is definitely a bigger addition than what we had in our previous policy. And just for the sake of clarity, the Title IX coordinator is me. So it's well, in title form, it was the Director of Pupil Services. And it is referenced in another policy of ours, I believe it's the Title IX policy. But we actually did review it for other purposes earlier in the year, where it was made clear that the Title IX coordinator is the Director of Pupil Services. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, moving forward. And then there's also a clear statement around who is responsible for reporting. And that's a big addition to this policy, where it states students, parents, coaches, sponsors, talking about those school, after school and before school activities. Volunteers and district employees shall be alert to incidents of hazing and shall report such conduct to the building principal or designee. And then we further say when a student's behavior, here's where we talk about their behavior as a student being a threat to the safety of others, that they are reported to the building leader or direct supervisor of, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back. This statement not only talks about students, it also talks about staff. So it's saying basically, if you're a student, a staff, and you see threatening behavior or you feel like you're being threatened, you should be reporting it to the building leader or your direct supervisor in accordance with applicable laws and board policy.
Aren't we we're all reporters in any case? Again,
Yes,
very similar to Safe to Say, we're
Mhm.
mandated reporters.
Yep. That's what that statement basically says. So now we get to the guidelines. So in this section, we talk about how we publicize the policy and share it with the community at large. And we have here distribution of the written policy, publication of handbooks. For example, we would include this language in next year's code of conduct, presentation and assembly. It can be used as, a back to school language with students in the beginning of the year, verbal instruction with coaches and sponsors of programs, student programs, and postings and signs, which is like that tier 1 level of climate, where we, have posters and signage, and our language reflects a safe environment from harassment and bullying and hazing. So, I'm sorry. I was trying to catch my eyes up to where we are here. So again, it just speaks more about who is involved in the implementation of the policy and ensuring that coaches' activities, and it speaks a lot about coaches because we recognize that hazing historically was something that occurred in athletics and athletic teams. However, the definition of hazing has been broadened significantly to recognize that it could be harassment, both physical, emotional, or mental harassment outside of athletics as well. And there is a complaint procedure. So this again is new to the policy, where it gives clear direction on if a student feels that they are being hazed, and they should promptly report the incident. They are encouraged to use the district's report form, which is the document that I'll bring up in a second. And that verbal and written complaints of hazing shall be provided to the building principal or designee. So we're not saying that the only way we can receive a report is through our form. We're also saying if a student is saying I'm being hazed to an adult, now it's the responsibility of that adult or building principal or supervisor to use the form and report it. So are there any questions about this section?
I think we also have to look out for other report-like words, because I'm not sure if our pre-college young people will know the word hazing, right? But intimidation, like maybe, maybe we have other code words that we listen for when a student is speaking to us, because I don't think they're going to use the word hazing. And, intimidated, that sort of thing, all which, for better or for worse, it's probably hazing.
I question the only thing with intimidation and hazing, they have two separate definitions. So we have to also be careful, because anyone could say a young man walked up to me and spoke aggressively and he intimidated me, and then it's this process. So I think we have to also look at that, making sure hazing has a specific definition. We just have to educate our students on what hazing means, because intimidation goes a lot further, but it could mean so much if you have a student being investigated under that word intimidation. I just think we have to really be careful, because they are two separate definitions with that.
Point well taken, Ms. Ivory.
So
And this question I do have, I'm sorry. In terms of the procedure, is there a designated timeline that this has to be done, since they are technically mandated to report this? Is there a timeline, or did we not get to that yet?
we did not get to that yet,
Okay.
but and I'm gonna lean on Ms. Hopkins a little bit to remind me, because I don't recall a timeline being stipulated in this language. So I think that's a good question. It does talk about, while we are investigating a report or a claim of hazing, that, and this is that next part, that upon receipt of the complaint of hazing, the building principal or designee in consultation with the superintendent or designee shall determine what, if any, interim measures should be put in place to protect students from further hazing, bullying, discrimination. So to that end, it's like you received a report, great, but you still have to immediately make sure this child is safe and secure, and we're addressing the immediate needs of the child.
So Danielle, I have two questions. That kind of, one is, can this form be completed anonymously for somebody else? Let's just say somebody else knows of somebody being hazed and they're trying to report it, but they don't want to be involved. Is that a possibility? And if the person is the one being hazed and they're reporting it, is there a mechanism that the reporter gets some sort of status, of what's going on every once in a while?
I think once we get to the form itself, we can dive into those pieces, because I think once you see the form, and again, this form, we can change it any way we want. This is just a form that's been suggested to us by PSBA, where we may be able to address some of those questions there.
Right. If I report something, I want to know that's getting traction, that something is going on. I might not know about it because I don't see it, but I'd like to get to know that I reported it and something is going on.
But I think that's a good point. Like, how do we track it, and how we're tracking it, and making sure that whatever outcomes are happening, they're recorded, and we're making sure we're accountable to making sure the subject, the student, is okay, but also that we have followed proper protocol moving forward to resolve it.
As a mandated reporter and also knowing as a social worker, things have to be done in a timely manner. Timely means that once reported by either an anonymous or either by staff or by a parent, there must be a 24-hour action done regarding the complaint. To answer Mr. Tong, after you, the reporter, reports your incident, you are not to know what's going on after that. That's against the HIPAA regulations. Nothing can be told to the reporter after that. But there is supposed to be procedures that are in place, which this policy has procedures in place to handle. I'm sorry, I was supposed to be on mute and I wasn't on mute. Sorry about that. So yeah, so you as a reporter would not get any information, or you should not be receiving any additional information after your report is received.
I guess my question related to process, we say in they and who the person is, the building principal. It kind of goes back to Dr. Becote's original question. It suggests to me that there's people in place to receive and follow through this hazing process. But it doesn't sound like we're there yet. Am I wrong in that?
This is me thinking.
I'm not sure I got your question.
So if a student feels they're being hazed,
Correct.
there's a form.
That's correct.
They get it from where?
Well, that's attached to this presentation. So there is a form, and then the student, whoever they're reporting it to, should have a copy of the form, access to the copy of the form.
But also, I think one of the pieces that we spoke about earlier was that they don't necessarily have to use the form. So they could just go to a caring adult and say, I'm being hazed, this is what's going on. And now that adult's responsibility is either, if they are the principal, they need to fill out the form. If they're not the principal, they need to go to their supervisor, whoever that is. It may be the principal, whoever it is, and they fill out the form, so that there is some adult that is advocating on behalf of the student. So we're not putting all the onus on the student to fill out the form or report it.
So I guess where I was going, after the form is filled out, what then happens? So that avocation, who's that team, that like to make sure that it's not lost?
It goes to the Title IX coordinator and the superintendent.
Okay.
And so I do want to also note, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think we are going to need to identify a step-by-step process that needs to be followed so that schools are clear. Because to say that it goes to the Title IX coordinator and the superintendent, to me, that doesn't mean anything. Because how's the issue being resolved? Because the Title IX coordinator and the superintendent are not going to be the people meeting with the team to resolve the issue. So that's why I'm being very particular about who is it that's doing what. So I think we're going to have to come back before we approve and move this policy forward so that we can be clear. Because I can see this turning into something where people are saying they're reporting something and nothing's being done about it.
All right.
And I just want to make sure that we have a process in place and the resources to do it.
Okay, so help me to understand. This is not the first time we had any policy regarding hazing and who's responsible for what, you know.
This policy is 20 years old, Joy. I
Right.
can't speak to what's happened.
Yeah, no, and I really wasn't directing it to you per se. So I'm trying to get an understanding of what did we have in place prior and who was responsible prior, so that, I'm sure our teachers and our building leaders would know the process of, if a child should be hazed or threatened to be hazed, that our building leaders would know what to do.
Right, right. And I'm not disagreeing with that point. What I'm saying is tonight, I cannot tell you what the process is going to be. And now that there's an updated policy, I'm just saying we need to have a written process in place that schools are going to follow. So we have to go back and do some homework and have a conversation with school-based leaders and principals around what does this look like in your building, and have a systemic process across the district, because I can guarantee you it's probably different in every school.
Okay,
Agreed.
That's what I'm saying we need to
Gotcha.
do on our end. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
I got you.
All right.
Which is why I asked Ms. Seward to incorporate the safe schools procedures for serious incidents. I wanted that language to be added in so that, and did you talk with Mr. Rickers, Ms. Seward?
Yes, I have, and he's actually gathering those documents so that we can add them as attachments. I'm sorry, so that we can add them as attachments to the policy as a reference, so we can reference them here.
Okay. What just happened?
What? What's wrong? We can still see you and hear you. Can you see and hear us? Okay. Wait a minute. Joy, can you hear us? Okay. Uh-oh. All righty. Oh, okay. She may be going out and coming back in. I'll just give her a second. Joy,
I'm texting you. Nope.
there we go. Can you hear us okay, Joy?
Yeah, I can hear y'all. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. My screen went black and I apologize.
No, it's fine. Hey, technical difficulties happen all the time. Does anybody else have any comments on this section? No? Okay, hearing none. Referral to law enforcement and safe schools reporting requirements. So this is actually what we were just talking about, the safe schools requirements and how we handle serious incidents, particularly how we interact with law enforcement, which is why we wanted to be able to reference the district's current procedures for serious incidents, in which we know we have that are, well documented and followed by our school safety officers as well as our school teams. So I'll just give you a second to kind of look through that. And
Yeah,
read
I
that.
do have a question.
Mhm,
So that first paragraph,
mhm.
so if a hazing act involves a weapon or a controlled substance, like I don't see. So they're saying if the hazing act involves one of those, then law enforcement must be contacted.
Yes. Because of the zero tolerance laws around weapons and controlled substances.
Got it. But if a hazing act happens and doesn't involve weapons and controlled substances,
Then, so is your question, what do we do then?
yeah, like then we do not have to contact law enforcement.
No, we do not.
And as unfair as the drug laws are, I believe, like drug paraphernalia, like I think, our goal isn't to give our young people records and engage them with law enforcement unless absolutely necessary.
Agreed. Agreed. Are there any other questions about this section? I'll give you a second to read it.
So if I understand correctly, that this is aligned, it's like side by side of what's happening in Safe School.
Yes, this is aligned with the Safe Schools legislation and act.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Safe to Say is a part of that legislation act, correct?
That I don't know. I would have to research that,
Yeah.
but I can look it up. I can look that up to get more clarity on that. And you know what? Let me just put it right here. Safe Schools.
Safe to Say is Pennsylvania Attorney General.
So I guess I would be suggesting where at all possible that those policies look alike where they can, so that the steps and the measures that are required for those involved to take, that it's consistent when it can be.
Yeah. I agree. And the form, is discrimination, sexual harassment, bullying, hazing, dating violence, and retaliation. Right? So they seem to throw it all together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But to Joy's point earlier, we should add timelines to this form probably. Right, just so everyone signs and understands.
Mm-hmm.
But Jennifer, answer me this, that Safe to Say,
Right.
because I'm trying to go in my head about that program. Wasn't, because I know when we were doing,
We did a training on it.
right, and wasn't that about cyberbullying? And that kids should be able to voice when they're feeling threatened or cyberbullying or peer-to-peer bullying or what,
That
or
wasn't,
if they're going to an adult is threatening them online. Like, wasn't that what that piece is? Because I think this is more so, again, hazing
this,
regarding, organizational.
well, this is absolutely hazing, but Safe to Say is youth violence.
But isn't that more, but what, if I remember from that training, it was more about online social media type stuff. They wasn't really talking about injury, bodily harm in Safe to Say.
It's all of it. I'm on their website now. Harassed, threatened, subject to forms of cyberbullying, school shooters, suicide. That's where our suicide comes from. It's all
encompassing, it sounds like.
Yeah, and it is that training we did. While he did focus on cyber at that training we did, gosh, that feels like forever ago.
When was it? You recall?
I can look it up, but
No.
probably early 2019.
Okay.
But that's mandated too, correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so, but it's all about youth violence, which certainly hazing falls under. And given that they're all unfunded mandates, we have to figure out, mostly all the timelines stay the same. cetera. So
Okay. Alrighty, I'm just gonna move on to the last few pieces, confidentiality, which we actually talked about earlier, of all parties. So I'll give you a second to look at that, as well as retaliation and consequences for violations. Let's give you a second to kind of read that. Does anybody have any questions about these sections or comments?
So I guess again, trying to go for uniformity, is there anywhere for any of the other safe to say, bullying, safe schools, step-by-step process already in place as to how we're dealing with it? And if not, dealing with each incident, circumstance. If not, it might be an opportunity to make sure that all of them have procedures in place, that all buildings know what is expected of each person in that process. Safe schools, safe to say, and hazing.
right, that'd be a really good goal. Because I think there is a safe to say process. A tip comes in from the line, you know, within X amount of time, you know, it goes to the team. Right. So I think that's a really good goal. Well,
Okay.
And another question, and I think it goes something to what Dr. Beacoats mentioned. Do we have the staff members identified and what their roles would be, and how all of this works? And I know that's not part of the policy, or maybe it needs to be spelled out a little bit more clearly in the policy, but I know that that would be district procedures. But those are some of those spelled out so that, you know, to be uniform across district, every building is going to be doing X, Y, Z. So-and-so person is going to conduct the investigation. So-and-so person is going to inform the parents of those affected. So-and-so person is going to inform the superintendent. So-and-so person is going to liaison with, you know, police officer if necessary. So-and-so person is going to liaison with any other organization if necessary. Any of those things. I don't know if that needs to be spelled out here or in the operational.
That would be, I would think that would be an operational procedure that would accompany the policy. But I
Now,
think the
according to
point
the
is well taken. I'm sorry.
According to this policy, if you go back up, the procedure is that that student would report to whoever they report to. We're not going to not mandate, but we're not going to tell a child who they can tell their secrets to. They're going to tell their secret to whoever they tell their secret to.
Understood, but you know,
Okay,
once it goes to an adult,
so then after that person receives that report, then that adult or that person then is supposed to go to their building leader, their principal, or maybe their lead teacher. That person then is supposed to go to the superintendent, or Ms. Sewer says Title IX. And then report then to, you know, I guess y'all go to child. I know from in my building we call the child safety hotline or the child link hotline. So, you know, I don't know what the practice and process is in place as far as the school district is concerned, but I know as far as, you know, as a, you know, and then it depends on if there is a bodily harm to self or to others, it may get reported to our local police department, wherever that incident may be taking place.
yeah, you know, it's crossed out, but there is a delegation of responsibility earlier in this policy. that I'm not suggesting we use, but it just sort of, the student should report, the principal does, so maybe there's some other complaint procedure or procedure that we can borrow from.
I think we can, but I think the points are well taken, that we have to spell out who's doing what their role is, what the time frame is. I think the point is well taken. So in addition to the form being the tool that is used to report, we'll need to flesh out what we need to do step by step when responding to a report, and follow up of that. And then of course, documenting what we're doing, how we're doing it, and of course, doing analytics on it as well, so that we're monitoring and keeping ourselves accountable to the work that we're doing. So the point is well taken.
But none of that information in my mind would be in the policy, because that's not a policy.
Agreed.
However,
That's a
that would be a
procedure.
part of the procedure.
Yes, sir. Agreed.
Okay.
All righty. And now we're to our, I think this is the last page. So this section talks about, I think I have to go back up to talk about, this is the section under consequences and for violations. So it talked about safe harbor. And then it talks about consequences to students. So basically consequences to the different categories of offenders that there may be. Just giving you some time to review it a bit. And then I'm going to scroll down just a little bit more so you can see the rest of it. Does anybody have any comments or questions on this section about consequences? All right. Going once, going twice. Any questions on this section? And that is actually it for this section. These are just the notations of the code and law that are referenced throughout the policy. So I'm going to stop my share for a second, give folks a chance to take a moment to think through it and ask any questions you may have about the policy. I've taken notes throughout of it, so the follow-up will be, and I agree with Dr. Becoats that we need to flesh out the procedure around the how and the who. And you've asked for some information related to how we respond to incidents now and the different types of programming that have been implemented along the way. I can share that I believe that all of these efforts are under the banner of Safe Schools. I do see that the state is like kind of pulling all of these, incident matters under this one umbrella. So you're correct that it follows the same reporting timeline. That's why they pull it all into one form. It follows it, and you also saw in there referencing that we would have to report these incidents through the Safe Schools report that we have to do annually. So it all kind of falls in together. So anybody have any questions or comments from there? Ms. Hopkins, being as though we have to kind of go back to the drawing board in terms of the procedures, do you think that we should still look at the form, or should we kind of hold off until we look at those procedures and kind of flesh those out first.
Well, I think we do need to go back and look at the procedures, but I don't think there's any harm in looking at the form now so that, everybody can get a sense of what that form looks like. And then if we need to go back on the drawing board for the form as well, we can do that as well before our next meeting.
Agreed. All righty. So I am going to go back to my presentation here, and here is the form. So this is also in the presentation that you have. It actually is a quite long form, which again, I think leads itself to, we definitely wouldn't want to just relegate a student to having to do this in order to report something wrong. It is quite extensive, and it actually talks about the position of the person who's actually filling this out. So the intent really is that an adult is filling this out on behalf of a student. So you'll see the language that is in here, and I actually can edit this form. I can download it into Google Docs. So it is editable, but it did come through as a PDF, just as an FYI. You'll notice a lot of references to Title IX, which does, speak to sexual harassment and different forms of harassment and discrimination and equity issues. So I'm just going to scan through this a little bit more. So here it does talk about the information about the person making the report. So it's and you see it could be a student, it could be a parent, an employee, a visitor, or a volunteer, or an other. And it asks a lot of questions, to try and dig down into who's making the report. And then there's the information about persons you believe are responsible for the bullying, harassing, and other discrimination that you're reporting.
Excuse me, Mrs. Stewart.
Yes,
I just have a question. Can you scroll back up for a minute?
sure.
Just a little bit. So it's interesting to me that everything in this document initially talks about the student, but on this form, the victim can be a district employee. So is this policy about the student, or is it about anybody in the district? And I'm really trying to be clear with this, because since I've been in the district employees have come to me about being retaliated against, intimidated, etc. So I just want to make sure that, if that's something that we should modify, maybe that comes off if we have another process for district employees reporting that. So it just seems like it's not consistent throughout. So I just bring that up as a point of, as a note that we should just make.
And it's very interesting because Ms. Hopkins made the same observation.
Okay, all right, cool. Cool.
And we even talked about maybe making this,
For anyone.
yes.
Well, yeah, because again, this is a all-encompassing form, so it's not just for hazing.
Right.
It can be used for other purposes that are offenses that are discussed under Title IX. So like you see, Title IX is all throughout this. So it's all about protecting people from these different offenses that are discussed in Title IX. So it's an all-encompassing document that we can use for multiple things, honestly.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
But I also see it as a tool that if we would want to break it apart, we have something to start with and start breaking it apart if we choose to.
I guess my question is, there's already a form for sexual harassment, correct?
That's a good question. Because I'm not sure. I'm not absolutely sure. So actually, I'm gonna put a note, what are the various forms for reporting these things that currently exist in the district? Okay.
And that might lend itself to streamlining.
Mm-hmm.
It could be one form.
Mm-hmm.
So thought.
Okay, that's a good point. Good question. What are the various forms that addresses that are currently used to address these topics? Okay. All righty. Well, now I pulled it right into Google Docs. So thank you, Ms. Cook-Henry, for that question. Oh, we did talk about the person making the question, making the report. And thank you, Dr. Beekos, for bringing that up about district employee. This next section does talk about the alleged aggressor and who reporting who this person believes is the alleged aggressor. And description of the conduct. And then, you know, the details of the situation of the case that they're reporting. The location, how, what, when, and where, if you will. This question is, for me, when I was reviewing this again earlier today, was interesting to me to try and establish a pattern. To see it, to make sure that people aren't abusing this process as a way of, being vindictive against a person that they may not get along with, things like that. We have similar language in our employee code of ethics, where we talk about, we want people to report violations of ethics, but this is not to be used as a way of, retaliating against somebody, for malicious intent. So, and I apologize.
And there are consequences for that as well, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Mhm.
ma'am.
Now, Ms. Cook-Henry, I just wanted you to know that I would looked up a few of the policies on sexual reporting, and there's different forms for different entities. Like, say, for instance, a sexual harassment against a person who is not an employee or a volunteer. The form that is used in that policy is a direct link to the child link under DHS.
Hmm.
So I think what would behoove us to do is, we're now talking about hazing. That's what this policy is in regards, student hazing. It's under the student policy heading. Right. So I think we need to, remain diligent to the policy that we're reading, and then look further into the different forms that we're using under what policy heading, and how do we, and maybe that should also maybe be a PD. If it's not a PD, we need to start having a PD regarding how do we do these reportings, and who will be responsible for these reportings, and blah 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 blah. But I think for this particular subject tonight, we're talking about student hazing, and maybe we need to, again, adhere to policy 247 under student, the student heading, and and use what form we're being asked by PSBA to use.
I'm just recording the lovely idea you just had about PDs about reporting and that entire, process. I think that is a great idea, and I wanted to capture it. So I have. Alrighty. Mr. Tong, to your point about anonymity, this form does ask for the person's signature.
Right, but
Now,
is this the adults kind of reporting this, or is this any person reporting this?
well,
Like a student
it's any person.
It's any
Like-
person.
Okay, so somebody has to fill this component out.
Mhm.
All right, so now one of the other questions is, and I might have missed it, as you perused, is there a place where it states how long has this been going on? Usually hazing might take, where it's over a period of time. not just an individual occurrence, but, you know, multiple occurrences kind of a thing?
I think
So,
it was,
Right where
Oh,
your
here we go.
cursor is.
I'm sorry?
I was saying right where your cursor is.
Yeah,
Yep,
I missed that part.
when, yep. So it talks about timing, and it does refer to if it has been happening over time, multiple dates and multiple times. Mhm. Okay, and then this section is to be completed by the Title IX coordinator. So it gives guidance to the next person that's receiving the report of what they are supposed to do upon receipt. But again, I have to reflect back onto what Dr. Beacoat said, that we need a little bit more meat and potatoes around the who, what, when, where, and how of this document and the procedure, and how we may use this as a tool in that procedure. So this just provides a little bit more information about the reporter, respondent information, level reporting, and type of reporting. So this, and I will tell you that this definitely aligns to Safe Schools reporting through the system, because these are the types of areas that we have to click off for when we're doing our reporting.
mhm.
And then reported conduct. Is it being repeated, to speak to your question about, you know, frequency of occurrences? All right. And it also includes, you know, different conduits in the district, like around special education, if it involves a child who has disabilities. And it gives, again, it goes into more in-depth questions about investigating. This is the investigating side of it. Safety concerns, things like that, where we're documenting what are we doing to keep the child safe. And I'm just gonna keep scrolling through. 'Cause I know we're about to hit the 1 hour mark. You know, here it also talks about dating violence. See, this is the investigation around dating violence. So you see how for the different categories, it asks specific questions to investigate those specific types of violations. So we get into the domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking. And then we get into the recommended course of actions. After we've investigated and it's either founded or partially founded or unfounded. I warned you this document was quite extensive. And then we get to the signature page. And then there's even more.
Because like when we were talking, Ms. Stewart, earlier, you know, we talked about how, you know, the state wants to make sure that we are documenting the actions that we're taking, because a lot of, you know, lawsuits are happening and they're just trying to, my favorite word is CYA, when it comes to, you know, people suing the school districts, suing states, suing, you know, so, you know, they want to know what procedures that we took, how long did this take us to do the investigation. So everything is being documented step by step, so that if a lawsuit should happen, it's documented what we did and what procedures and who did we report to, you know, because you always know there's always somebody who drops the ball. So we just need to make sure that we're covered.
Agreed, and that's why that form is so expensive. And
Right.
it asks a lot of questions.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Alrighty. So I really appreciate the conversation and all of the notes you gave us. And I appreciated us the purpose of this meeting, to get all of your best thoughts on, to direct us accordingly. Are there any other comments or questions about the policy or the procedure or anything?
So I have one more question about the procedure. Is there anywhere where, for example, if I'm a victim and I didn't, the quick peruse, I may not have noticed it, where I may be aware of other victims or corroborators of who I may have, who may have seen, or, who may have seen, the hazing rituals or, acts,
Mhm.
or who I
Yeah.
may have been other victims of this.
Yes, I believe there was a section where you can, describe other people who were involved and what their role was. So to your point, it could be that I wasn't the person who actually was doing the offense, but I witnessed it and I really didn't intervene, or I may have egged it on, or whatever my role in the incident may have been.
Okay,
And that's information that needs to be gathered for investigation anyway.
correct. Right.
Right.
All righty, well, Ms. Hopkins, I'll turn it back over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you everyone for attending. Just an FYI, our next step, Ms. Sword and I will be going over the policy and just make sure that we hit every piece that went on everyone's mind this evening, and then, bring it back to the board and make sure that it'll be presented properly for our meeting for vote. Also, Ms. Sword and I had talked about, once again, resuming, for those that were on the committee before COVID, we were going over the policies in our manual to make sure that the wordings, the language that are clearly up to date. We found some that were dated back in 1999, so we really want to go through our policy manual, make sure that it's up to date, the language is correct. And so we're going to be tackling that again this year, whether it be in person or Zoom. That's what we'll be doing. That's our homework. So we're going to start on that, working on the policy manual, beginning with 000 again. We're going to, what we didn't do, but we're going to do is to really go through the website, the PVSA and NSBA's policy, to make sure all these acronyms.
I know.
Make sure that our policies are reading current, and we'll bring that to the rest of the board and to the community to make sure that the wordings is up to date. So we'll be working on 0000, and that's governing the our board, so and those policies. So if you get a moment, you have access to those policies on the school website. Take a gander at it, go through it, policy committee members, and if you see anything that we need to look at. Oh, I'm sorry. And we're just going to do 000 to 005.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're taking
That's 000 to 00005.
We started them
Okay.
January of 2020.
Huh?
We started them January.
Right.
of
That's why I said
2020.
pre-COVID.
And we
We
did
started,
and we
and
did
We
take
got
the
to
time.
11.
And we did
right.
take the time to timeline it out. So that's the other piece. We started a document where we're going to lay out for the whole year
Right.
what our plan of action is around reviewing policies and the timeline for review, so that we have kind of a rubric to go by for this year, so that there's some predictability to it. And everybody gets a chance to review things in a timely manner, in a more relaxed manner.
Great. Meetings are first week,
Thursday.
first week of the month, Thursday.
Yes. All
Gotcha.
right. All right,
Hey,
everybody.
that's it, everybody. Thank you so much.
Have a great evening.
Night night.
Yeah.
Good night.